Hello, Brian. Can you hear me, Brian? I can see you unmuting. You can hear me, but I can't hear you. Can you hear me, Brian?
Hello, John. Can you hear me?
It's Philomena. Yeah, I can hear you now. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning, Simon and Dan. Yeah, up.
Very surprised to see Simon here at this time of the morning. Breakfast meeting.
Okay.
Philomena, did you see my message on the WhatsApp group?
Yeah. I'm checking it right now.
Okay, it's just asking whether you wanted to do a general intro for the session before I go into that PowerPoint.
Intro about CCAK?
Just about the dialogues. So just saying this is part of a series of monthly dialogues that this year will be facilitated by CCAK with support from MEX, Kenya Power, UK Pact, UK Aid, etc. And that there will be another dialogue in March. The recording of this one will be, or this session will be recorded. Recording will be available from wherever it will be available from afterwards, that kind of stuff. You still there?
Hello, John.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm saying you can just do the intros because I've logged in with my phone and I can't press my presentation because they took power on this side.
Okay, no problem. I'll do it.
Thanks, John.
Let me check if I can share my screen.
Yeah, sure.
Can you see now? Do you see the presenter view or the full screen view?
John, yes, I can see your presentation.
Can you see it in the full screen view or is it in the presenter view?
Yes, I can see.
Can you see it in the full screen view? As in, like, is it filling up the entire screen or does it have the PowerPoint stuff on the side there, like the tab at the top? Hello?
Yes, John, I can see it.
It is in full screen.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So as we have 8 people joined us already, welcome to those who have arrived on time. I suggest we wait a few minutes for those that haven't yet before we get started.
You guys can also share the link with your friends who are in the call, but they haven't joined yet, so that they come in.
Okay, I see we have 13 people here, so let's just give it maybe 1 more minute to see whether we get to quorum, and then I think we should make a start. Okay, I think we should make a start. Thank you to everyone here who has arrived on time. Appreciate it. Those that haven't, then hopefully you'll be able to catch up via the recording. So yeah, just letting you know that the recording will be available after the session on the WhatsApp group that we use for the community of practice. If you're not comfortable being recorded, then please do keep any comments that you may want to make into the chat. My name is John Leary. I'm a senior researcher with the Modern Energy Cooking Services, or MECS program, also a co-director at Gamos East Africa, and a board member at the Clean Cooking Association of Kenya, CCAK. So today we have a session on the recent tariff review, or the ongoing tariff review process, which is a part of the monthly e-cooking community of practice dialogues that we have been hosting for almost a year now. So the monthly dialogues aim to bring together the clean cooking and the electricity access sectors and create a space for dialogue around the emerging opportunities for electric cooking. So these dialogues are facilitated by CCAK in a strategic partnership with Kenya Power as two key institutions in the clean cooking and electricity access sectors. And that's supported by UK aid via the UK Pact and the MECS programs. Excuse me. So today's session, as I mentioned, is about the ongoing tariff review process, which is happening with Kenya Power and EPRA at the moment. It's something that we've been able to have quite a bit of insight into over the last couple of weeks due to the public consultation process that is currently happening. And in particular, there has been a lot of interest expressed by the regulator, EPRA, around the opportunities for facilitating further growth of the emerging electric cooking sector, because as we will see in the presentation today, the proposed tariffs by KPLC are not particularly favourable to electric cooking. So without further ado, let me jump on to the next slide. Let me just check before I go any further. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. So I'm going to start with a brief presentation of some of the things that we've learned so far about the tariff review process. And then I'd like the majority of the session today to really be this open discussion, to really hear what other members of the community of practice think, and to help us to guide our lobbying during this window of opportunity whereby we do have some influence over what the potential pricing structure might look like for electricity in Kenya over the next 3 years. So this presentation at the beginning is going to take us through what electricity pricing looks like in Kenya at the moment, what it might look like in the future, giving an overview of the proposed retail tariffs that Kenya Power have submitted to EPRA that are currently out for public consultation. I will then give some examples of electricity pricing strategies that have been used in other contexts to prioritize electric cooking. And then to look at some potential options that we've been considering for tariff amendments, and then an open discussion on whether there are any other options that we've overlooked and on which preferred option or options we might want to focus on in our lobbying throughout the rest of the tariff review process. So electricity pricing in Kenya. At the moment, the tariff is structured according to customer type, and in fact, in the new proposed tariffs, then it will also be, but with perhaps a bit more granularity going forward. So we have the household or domestic customers. Domestic customers are categorized into either lifeline customers or regular customers. The lifeline customers consume less than 100 kilowatt hours per month on average, and the regular customers more than that amount. There are small commercial customers, so this is small businesses, small institutions, etc. And then commercial and industrial tariffs for the large power consumers, and then some special applications which get their own tariffs. At the moment, there is a street lighting tariff designed to promote the usage of electricity at night when there's extra electricity available. And in the new tariffs, there's an e-mobility tariff already proposed, designed to promote the growth of this emerging sector. So that in many ways was the original entry point that we saw for lobbying in this tariff review process. The fact that an e-mobility tariff had been created meant that Kenya Power were clearly open to supporting the growth of new industries which could promote further demand growth for Kenya Power, but also broaden the social impact of electricity access. Can I just check, can people see this little box down on the right-hand side of my screen that says participants on it? Or can everyone see the slide full screen?
Yes, I can see the slide.
Okay, great. All right, let me continue then. Thank you. So this is the current tariff structure for the Lifeline tariff. So in Kenya, then the pricing is a bit complicated because there is what KPLC makes out of each unit of electricity that's sold, and there are all of the other bits that are apportioned to different institutions, like, for example, a fuel surcharge, and ERC, like the regulatory body surcharge, VAT, for example. In many other countries, these are all just packaged together, and consumers are simply told this is the price that you pay. Whereas in Kenya, the price is often quoted as what is listed here as the consumption charge. And this is what we will be looking at in the proposed tariffs by Kenya Power. The consumption charge is something that is held relatively constant by the utility. And then these other things are variable, or many of them are variable. As you see on the graph here from the website Stima Tracker, these can vary quite significantly, up to around 100% for some of these, which means that the actual price of electricity that you pay to top up your units will vary from month to month as these charges are adjusted. So we see the Lifeline tariff here, which is what consumers who use less than 100 kilowatt hours per month are paying, as a base charge referred to here as consumption of 7.7 shillings per kilowatt hour. And then you have all of these other things lumped on top, which almost double the price of, or more than double the price of electricity. So at the moment, most Kenyans who are consuming less than 100 kilowatt hours every month are paying almost 20 shillings per kilowatt hour because of the addition of these other charges on top. So what about regular consumers? Well, this is the normal tariff. And I say regular consumers, but actually most household consumers are on the Lifeline tariff, which is one of the reasons why Kenya Power want to restructure the tariffs currently, because the Lifeline tariff is supposed to be for those who really cannot afford to use very much electricity and really need a lifeline to keep them going to power just a few very basic appliances. However, most Kenyans, I think it's around 90% of customers, domestic customers, are currently Lifeline customers. So this domestic tariff only applies to around 10% of the existing customer base, which is around 8 million households at the moment. So this one, the main difference is the consumption charge is higher, 12.6 versus 7.7. And then many of these other charges are fixed. Some of them are as a percentage, for example, VAT on top of that. So that means that the total comes up to around 25 shillings per kilowatt hour. So around 20 shillings per kilowatt hour for Lifeline, and around 25, 26 at the moment for regular domestic customers. So why Kenya Power reviewing the tariffs? Well, this is part of a regular cycle that's supposed to happen every 3 years, where Kenya Power reviews its costs and reviews what it's charging consumers and tries to balance those. So previously, then Kenya Power was losing quite a lot of money. In fact, the previous charges, the previous reduction in the electricity charge by around 15% meant that the government actually had to subsidize the cost of electricity in order to bring that cost down just before elections to make sure they could keep their promises. At the moment, that's quite an unsustainable level. So Kenya Power are having to increase the cost of electricity to try and cover the additional costs that they are incurring in order to cater for this expanded network due to the last mile connectivity and other programs which have connected more Kenyans to their power network. That means they have more costs in order to service those lines, in order to deliver quality electricity. Then they need to increase the costs. They need to increase the revenue that they are bringing in to ensure that it balances with their costs. So there is a need for either more subsidy from the government or more revenue from the consumer. And the proposed tariffs are designed to get rid of government subsidy and to be completely cost reflective. So this review process it started earlier this month, where these proposed tariffs were gazetted and the public consultation process began. The consultation process officially closes tomorrow. However, we have been invited by EPRA to make a dedicated submission around electric cooking, which can be submitted by the end of this week. So the meeting today will directly inform what we make in that submission to EPRA. So this is not just something that we have to do collectively. Any person from any organization or from the general public is allowed to make a submission to EPRA. If you search on their website, you will see the contact details of the members of staff at EPRA who are managing the process. And any organization can submit any kind of comments, suggestions, proposals to EPRA, and they will take them into consideration when they are reviewing Kenya Power's proposed tariffs. And if there are sensible suggestions, they will mandate Kenya Power to make revisions to their to the proposed tariffs that they've submitted. So in March, then EPRA and Kenya Power will go through an iterative process of revising these tariffs, redoing the financial modeling, taking into account some of these suggestions. And in mid-March, a paper will be tabled for board approval within Kenya Power with these revised tariffs. And in April, we expect to see the new tariffs implemented. So this is when ordinary Kenyans will start paying the new amount gazetted for electricity tariffs on Kenya Power's grid. So what are the proposed retail tariffs? Let me just say, I think it would be good to try and run through this presentation first of all, without taking comments during the presentation itself, just for time to ensure we have enough at the end for discussion. But if you do have any comments, please do put them down in the chat so you don't forget them, and we can come back to them at the end of the discussion. So what are the proposed retail tariffs? Well, they are very complicated. There's a huge table that tells you exactly what they look like for all different types of customers, both the current tariffs, the ones that were approved in 2018-19, and the proposed tariffs for the next 3 years. So they are supposed to decrease progressively over the next 3 years as Kenya Power recovers some more of its costs from the previous 3-year period. So let's actually zoom in on the part that I think is most relevant for the discussion today, which is the domestic and the small commercial tariff. So the domestic tariff, we see the lifeline tariff has been restructured from 0 to 100 units. It's now going to be 0 to 30 units per month for the lifeline. And the small commercial tariff, which pretty much mirrors the domestic tariff, but also now includes a time of use tariff, which is really good news. So time of use tariff allows people in the middle of the night to use electricity at a much cheaper rate. And on weekends, most of Saturday and all of Sunday, electricity will be available to small commercial consumers at almost half the regular rate. So the good news is, yes, this time of use tariff, which is good for both cooking, say, for example, in institutions where there's prep done very early in the morning. Very good, for example, for churches who are going to be cooking for lots of people on a Sunday. They can do that very cheaply now. It's also very good for battery-supported electric cooking because Kenya Power really want to increase consumption at times when other loads are low, when they have surplus power on the grid. Currently, geothermal power is being vented in the middle of the night because it's being produced constantly, but there's very little demand for it at that moment in time, which is part of the reason for the street lighting tariff, because it's a energy demand which is almost exclusively during darkness. So this means that if you have a battery supporting your cooking device, as we're starting to see in several field trials across the country, then you can charge that battery at night for a very low rate, and then you can discharge it when you want to cook during the day. However, the bad news is that electric cooking is going to become quite a lot more expensive for almost everyone, including the people on the time of use tariff, because that time of use tariff is still higher than the lifeline tariff. It'll only be cheaper if you're going from a regular tariff to that time of use tariff at off-peak hours. So it's especially bad for customers who are currently on the lifeline tariff, who have consumption between 30 and 100 kilowatt hours per month. So this graph here plots out some of those numbers from that very dense table on the last slide. So looking at the first group of 3 bars on the left, then we can see that the previously approved tariffs in blue They were reduced by 15% in orange during last year, just before the elections. And now they're going to pop up to the grey bar on the right-hand side, which is an 82% increase for 82% increase of the proposed tariffs versus the currently enforced tariffs, which are the ones which were put in place last year. So this is the orange bar to the grey bar, which is an 82% increase for customers who are consuming between 0 and 30 kilowatt hours per month, which is actually the majority of Kenya Power's customers. I think it's around 6 million customers are consuming within this amount. So the people who it's really bad news for are the people who are consuming between 30 and 100 kilowatt hours per month. Because if you look at this set of bars in the middle here, then you can see that people who are previously paying around 7 kilowatt hours, 7 shillings per kilowatt hour as their base charge, are now going to be paying around 21 shillings per kilowatt hour. So that's a 182% increase. And that is because the tariffs have increased, but they've also bumped up from the lifeline to the regular band. It's not so bad if you're already a regular consumer. So if you're already consuming more than 100 kilowatt hours per month, then your tariff is going to increase by 72% on the base charge. But of course, this is looking just at the base charge. So if we add in all of those other things on top and on this previous slide here, then all of these other additions to what you actually pay, then the graph looks a little bit less bad. If you're in the 0 to 30 kilowatt hours per month band, then you're going to have 30% extra to pay on your electricity bills. If you're 30 to 100, 71% extra. And if you're 100 plus kilowatt hours per month, it's around 35% extra. So outside the lifeline, around a third increase, at the bottom of the lifeline, around a third increase, but in the middle of what was the old lifeline, then those customers are going to be paying around 2/3 more for their electricity, based upon the current charges enforced. So this means that around 1.9 million KPLC customers are going to shift from that lifeline band into the regular tariff. And this is a deliberate move by KPLC to realign the lifeline provision with its intended social objectives of providing a little bit of power for those customers who really, really need it and are just going to use very basic appliances. However, of course, that's very bad news for people who want to cook with electricity, because that's likely to push you above that 30 kilowatt hours per month band. So to use an electric pressure cooker, for example, for maybe half of your food, might use around, say, 10 to 20 kilowatt hours per month. To cook all your food with electricity might use around 40 kilowatt hours per month. So unless you're just cooking a few meals here and there with a very efficient appliance, you're likely to bump up over that 30 kilowatt hours per month threshold and start paying more for all of your electricity, not just the electricity that you're using for cooking. So what are the potential options that we could put on the table for amending this tariff to be a little bit more favorable to electric cooking? Well, we need to remember that KPLC needs to make money. As much as we do want to make things as cheap as possible for the consumer, we also want to have electricity available to as many consumers as possible, and the highest quality electricity available. So the most consistent supply of electricity and the most regular kind of voltage range available to consumers. And in order to do that, then Kenya Power needs to invest in infrastructure in order to be able to deliver quality electricity to as many Kenyans as possible. So if there's going to be any kind of subsidy that is focused towards electric cooking, then it needs to be a well-targeted subsidy. So price signaling, it can be a very powerful tool to elicit behavioral change. But if we're doing that, then it needs to be very clearly communicated to the consumer. In fact, Kenya Power's existing tariff is actually very favorable to electric cooking. 100 kilowatt hours per month allowance is actually what we advocate for in many other contexts. However, it's not necessarily communicated to consumers that is why the tariff was designed in that way. And it probably wasn't designed with that necessarily in mind, because it was designed many years ago. But if there is to be any new focus on designing a tariff for electric cooking, it needs to be very clear to consumers that that is why it is being designed, if we want there to be significant uptake as a result. And then, of course, if we're just subsidizing ordinary consumption, then KPLC will lose money. However, if we do manage to stimulate demand growth in other sectors because of a reduced tariff, then that will, of course, also be very good for KPLC's bottom line. So the question is, can a discounted tariff still improve KPLC's bottom line by increasing the total sales enough to compensate for the lost margin on each unit? So we don't know yet. We haven't done detailed modeling, but what I want to present in the next section is a few options for different things that we could model to try and see what the outcome would be like in terms of KPLC's revenue, in terms of demand growth versus lost revenue on existing consumption. So we do have some examples to look to, for example, of course. Ethiopia have had a rising block tariff for many years, very, very low prices. Hydropower generation also very subsidized, but it's been very successful in facilitating the uptake of electric cooking, which is now widely adopted in urban areas. So I'm not suggesting that we go down the full subsidy route in Kenya, and Kenya also has the benefit of much more reliable electricity because it's a diversified mix of renewables. But it does show how a neighboring country has implemented a rising block tariff, which has been able to gradually grow consumption, including encouraging customers to cook their food with electricity. In Uganda, then they introduced an e-cooking tariff in December 2021. It's a decreasing block tariff. So it actually goes the other way. They have a lifeline tariff for 0 to 15 kilowatt hours per month. And then it goes to a regular tariff. And then once you get to 80 kilowatt hours per month, up until 150, then the tariff reduces again to encourage people who are consuming between 15 and 80 kilowatt hours per month to increase their consumption, primarily through e-cooking. That's how it is marketed, but also, of course, through any other means that they may choose to. So this is a subsidy available to everyone and is broadly encouraging demand stimulation across, remember, the utility in Uganda, the major utility, across their customer base. In South Africa, then electric cooking is already the primary means of cooking for the majority of the population. And there have been many instruments that have been used to get to this point. One that I'm going to pull out is the free basic electricity, which is a means tested subsidy for low income households in certain municipalities. So low income households could qualify for a small amount of electricity, I think it was 50 kilowatt hours, for free to meet their basic needs. So instruments like this, which are really targeted, can really help the lower income consumers to start expanding their demand and start utilizing electricity for a range of different applications, including cooking. And then in Kenya, we have PowerHive, who are a solar hybrid mini grid developer, who have really been very innovative in terms of promoting the uptake of electric cooking to grow demand on their mini grids. They've sold financed appliances to their customers, and they've also developed e-cooking bundles to enable their customers to cook during the daytime, to use the surplus electricity coming in from the solar, and to grow demand at a time when extra electricity is available. So there's 4 options that I'm going to go through now. Option 1 is simply just keep the lifeline tariff as it is. There's nothing wrong with the lifeline tariff in terms of facilitating growth of electric cooking at the moment. It's 100 kilowatt hours per month. It's very reasonably priced, where electricity is cost effective against most other fuels. So it's a very easy option for Kenya Power to implement because they have to do absolutely nothing at all. Just leave the lifeline provision as it is. However, looking at those 6.9 million customers who are currently in the 30 kilowatt hour per month bracket, that leaves 1.9 million customers who would switch from lifeline to regular tariff. And that would mean that they would generate 16 billion shillings every year additional revenue for Kenya Power by doing that. So that's comparing the new tariff that they would pay, the base tariff to Kenya Power with the current tariff. So it's not very economically attractive for Kenya Power to just leave things as they are. In fact, this is one of the major motivations for for designing a new tariff. So easy to implement, but not very good for KPLC's bottom line. Option 2, it could introduce a new consumption band. So that could be, for example, in the 30 to 100 kilowatt hour per month band, this band where people are going to be bumping up from the regular to the lifeline tariff. So this doesn't have to be the same as the lifeline. This could be a rising block tariff, for example, similar to the Ethiopian tariff at, for example, 17 Kenyan shillings per kilowatt hour base charge. Lifeline will be 14 and the regular will be 21. So somewhere in between the two of those. And this could give people a stepping stone to come out of the lifeline and facilitate incremental demand growth rather than people being afraid to raise their consumption because they might pop out of the lifeline and start paying more for a lot more for all of their consumption. Again, it supports demand growth of any kind. It's not just electric cooking. Another option is a decreasing block tariff, similar to the Uganda e-cooking tariff, where the price would go down once you get into a certain range. So, for example, this could be 10 Kenyan shillings per kilowatt hour. So we go from 14 for the lifeline down to 10 for this new band, whatever it may be called. Maybe it's called the e-cooking band, for example, and then up to 21 or perhaps even more for the regular tariff. So this will send a very strong price signal to increase demand in this certain range, but it will create an even bigger leap for consumers going from this block to the regular tariff. So mixed messages. Another option is you could offer a special tariff for eligible customers. You could choose customers that you know have an electric cooking appliance. For example, in some of these appliance financing schemes that we're starting to see pop up, such as the MCFA, the Modern Cooking Fund for Africa, or the NDEV and CLASP EPC appliance financing scheme that's been running since 2021. So these could be schemes that are approved by KPLC that they're already either running or participating in or see value in, and they would also have the benefit that these would have a quality assurance component to them, or they would very likely have a quality assurance component to them. So only good quality, energy efficient appliances would qualify for these schemes, and that way you're growing demand, but also in a sustainable way. You're not facilitating the influx of very poor quality, cheap products that are only going to last a few months. It would also have the benefit that you would be able to track the effect on demand growth very easily, because you would need to collect the meter number when purchasing the appliance in order to switch that consumer from the regular tariff to the e-cooking tariff, or whatever this ends up being called. And so that would enable KPLC to track the impact of electric cooking on demand stimulation very, very clearly. So you could also pilot this with a small number of customers. We have many pilots going on in Kenya at the moment, and we could try this with a small number of customers, review the data, and then scale up if it's successful in growing demand. So again, something that could be quite attractive to both Kenya Power and to EPRA, in order to limit the initial impact on revenues, and to only roll it out once we've proven that it's successful in growing demand more than it reduces revenue for Kenya Power. So it's well targeted, but more complex to implement. Option 4 is to offer a special tariff for smart metered appliances. So we see an increasing number of e-cooking appliances, companies like ATEC, PowerPay, for example, now featuring embedded smart metering. So this is a widget inside the appliance which measures the energy consumption as you're cooking. So these appliances are already recording this data. It would just be a case of connecting them to KPLC's customer billing database, which perhaps is easier said than done. But if that is possible, sending that data to KPLC, and if it's possible then to separate out consumption, which again, there's complexities with doing this on a prepaid meter because you've already paid for the units, then you could potentially implement a separate tariff solely for electricity, which you know is used just for cooking. This is similar to a previous scheme, which has already been implemented and is already in the current tariffs for water heating, where a separate meter is used. So 2 household meters, one for general consumption and one for water heating. So it's not completely new, but what would be new would be using these external meters, which are being embedded into appliances to facilitate the pricing of electricity. So this one is extremely well targeted, but very complex to implement, because you've got to marry up this data from external meters to Kenya Power's customer billing database. So it may be easier to offer customers rebates on electricity purchases at the end of the week or the month, based upon electricity that you know has been used for cooking, something that could be subsidized, for example, by carbon finance, rather than directly by Kenya Power and cross-subsidization from other customers. So just to recap and cut across those different options that we've discussed here, then in terms of these three different dimensions, ease of implementation, targeting, and co-benefits, then leaving the lifeline as it is very easy to implement. Don't have to do anything at all. But in terms of targeting, then it targets key consumption range for demand, the key consumption range for demand growth, so 30 to 100 kilowatt hours, but it creates a ceiling where people are afraid to move above that, and there's no real co-benefits to it, other than perhaps that it promotes demand growth for all types of electricity use, not just cooking. So having a specific band, a tariff focused on discounting electricity in a specific band, for example, the 30 to 100 kilowatt hours per month. And this is, again, quite easy to implement. And it will be a new band introduced for all customers. So it's not particularly targeted, a little bit more so than leaving the lifeline as it is. But an advantage is, especially if you use the rising block tariff, it can offer a stepping stone for people to come out of that lifeline and to start growing their consumption. In terms of the special tariff, this is the one that could potentially be linked to appliance financing programs. Then this is relatively easy to implement, but it's the eligibility criteria that would be difficult to implement, because that has to be agreed upon and implemented in partnership with Kenya Power, and there have to be guidelines drawn up and followed as to how to do that in terms of who gets to qualify for that. Let's call it an e-cooking tariff for now, who gets to qualify for it. It would be relatively well targeted though, because it would target just the low income or perhaps middle income customers who are participating in these appliance financing schemes. And we know that they would have e-cooking appliances, but we don't know what electricity is used for cooking. It will be subsidizing the entire of their consumption, not just what they consume for cooking. Does also have the co-benefit that it will capture data on demand growth amongst customers that we know have e-cooking appliances though. So the fourth option, the special tariff for smart metering, it's very difficult to implement with these data sharing protocols that have to be developed between appliance distributors and KPLC, but is extremely well targeted directly at the lower income customers who we know have electric cooking appliances and only the electricity that they're using for cooking. So this has very strong co-benefits in terms of the use of this data to really understand the situation on the ground, how often people are really using these appliances, and to match that up with the demand growth profiles of the utility to really see, is electric cooking effectively stimulating demand for electricity? So there is, of course, one other option for increasing or one of the entry point for electric cooking in the new tariffs. And actually, it's one where there is already a reasonably favorable option there. This is the commercial and institutional cooking using the small commercial tariff. So smart meters are already installed for small commercial tariffs. So a time of use tariff is now being rolled out. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a strong incentive for very early morning or weekend cooking, or utilizing a battery to charge during off-peak times and then to discharge into your cooking device when you want to cook. So less data is available for commercial and institutional cooking to make a case to KPLC. The supply chain for larger appliances is not as developed as it is for household appliances, but we have been given a strong steer by EPRA as to this is an opportunity that they'll be very willing to look at, and perhaps one where there's more scope for piloting because these smart meters are already out in the field. And so it's easier for us to get data, more granular data on the effect of the tariff. So the options discussed previously, options 1 to 4 are still valid. And it's important to note that this lifeline allowance of 0 to 30 kilowatt hours is even less relevant for commercial and institutional customers than domestic customers, because likely they'll be out of this band even before they start using electricity for cooking. So let me stop here, and I'd like to open up the discussion and see what people think about these options that have been presented. Are there options that we have not explored yet? Are there variations on these? And are there preferences towards any particular option here or set of options that we should focus our lobbying over the next week or so on? So let me stop here and let me see whether there are any questions that have popped up in the chat.
Hi, John. We have questions for you in the chat box.
Yeah, I see these here. Yeah. Maybe if we could invite some of the people who've put the questions in here to unmute. I think Simon has put quite a few questions on here. So Simon, would you mind unmuting and providing us with a small break to my otherwise monotonous monologue, which has gone on for about half an hour now?
No, I was just listening to you, thinking that, you know, KPLC, at the end of the day, KPLC are trying to improve their revenue. I think in the background note, you said that, you know, they generate X amount, I forget the number, and the demand is only X minus 30%. So there's a question about stimulating more demand so that they get revenue. They can either get more revenue by putting the price up, or they could get this similar revenue like your option one, leave everything as it is, but have a campaign on e-cooking that increase people's use. You said that the majority are currently in below the 30 kilowatt hour, so e-cooking would take them above that probably. So I was just making the comment that when I don't know how many KPLCs and EPRAs are on this call, but when the case is made to KPLC, I think it is important to highlight that this money exists and is already in the economy, in the Kenyan economy. At the moment, households are spending it on charcoal and LPG in urban areas. And so it's pivoting existing money into KPLC's pocket. It's not trying to create new money. So, you know, in contrast, when you just have an advertising campaign saying, I don't know, watch television for longer or leave your lights on, you know, then, you know, that is new money. That's not of benefit to the household. But this is actually existing money that is being pivoted. And I just think that should be a prelude to whatever you pitch. And my other comment on the chat was that Ecuador actually tried what I think is your option 3. And they, if people bought an induction stove, then they had 100 kilowatt hours free. But they made the mistake that they left the LPG subsidy in place. So actually people got really cheap LPG. And so what people did was they bought an induction stove, stuck it in a cupboard, carried on cooking with LPG, and then used their 100 kilowatt hours to watch more television. So, you know, that is danger maybe of option 3. Although Kenya doesn't have strongly subsidized LPG.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would be the difference in that at the moment, then electric cooking is a bit cheaper than LPG. The market price has risen to quite significantly, whereas we haven't yet conducted the detailed modeling that we need to make this strong case, but I'm imagining that likely it will tip the balance and that electric cooking for all of your food will likely become more expensive than LPG with the proposed tariffs. One of the things that we would like to do together with the Burn manufacturing team who came to EPRA on Friday for the latest meeting that we had is to try and break that down by foods and, if possible, by appliances, because it's not going to make any difference to people boiling heavy foods in an electric pressure cooker. That's still going to be by far and above the cheapest way of cooking heavy foods. It's 5 times cheaper than cooking with charcoal, gas, or any other fuel at the moment. So electricity tariffs would have to go up by 5 times and have to be over 100 shillings per kilowatt hour for that to change. But what it is going to do is going to tip the balance for people, for example, frying an egg on an induction stove. That may become cheaper to do that on gas than it will be on electricity. And of course, there's the psychological effect in that people already have the perception that electricity is too expensive for cooking, even when it's not. So if the tariffs go up, then even in cases where it may still be cost effective to cook with electricity, then there's still going to be the thought in many people's head that, okay, maybe it might have been before, but it's definitely not now. Even though for some foods and some appliances, of course, it will still be cheaper. And then just reflecting on your other comment, Simon, about the demand growth, yes, definitely in the submission that we make to EPRA and KPLC, then we definitely do want to emphasize the point about this money being already out there. And if we can quantify that through some of the other research that has been done, perhaps the work in the household cooking sector study. It's a shame that this is not happening a few months later, because we would have much better data from the work going on for the clean cooking and e-cooking strategy. But I feel like we could make some kind of estimate based upon the number of people using fuels, average prices, etc., and show that that is existing expenditure that could be relatively easily translated into electricity units if there's a favorable price point. So Philomena has asked if people can raise their hand to ask questions. I don't see any hands up at the moment. I'm also looking through the participant list, and I just wanted to ask, is there anyone from KPLC or from EPRA who has joined? I know Irene was planning to join us, but had another meeting with the e-cooking committee within Kenya Power earlier today. But is there anyone on here that I don't recognize from KPLC or EPRA who would like to jump in?
Thanks, John. From the attendance list, I don't see any. Thanks, John. From the attendance list, participants list, sorry, I don't see any representative from KPLC unless they haven't registered or EPRA.
Okay, well, let's open it up for a general discussion then. And if there's anyone else, I see Danton has put some comments in here. Katrine, yeah, would either you two like to share those thoughts with the rest of the group?
I think for Danson, maybe he's not at a place where he can speak, maybe because of technical issues.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, I'm reading that one.
Yeah. So you can just address the comment that he has written in the chat.
So I think Danton's comments are more on the generation side, so around connecting the generation that's being done at county level with the demand at county level. And making the point that it's the thermal power generation which is pushing up a lot of the cost of electricity. So there's that one charge, one of those thick lines in the shifting cost of electricity is around the cost of fuel. Then as fuel has got more expensive for all of us due to the Ukraine war and other factors, then that has meant that electricity has got more expensive in Kenya, despite the fact that around 90% of electricity is produced from renewable sources. There is that 10%, which is often the peak load, which is produced from thermal power, from either, well, I think most of it is from imported fuels rather than from gas at the moment. But that pushes up the cost quite significantly using these, what are often referred to as emergency power plants, because they're only really used when you really, really have to in order to bridge that gap between demand and supply. And Simon, just coming back to your point about excess generation, then I think from what we've seen on the latest presentations from Kenya Power, then there's only a reserve margin of around 3% at peak times now, as a lot of the new generation that was planned has not come online yet. And so whilst there is a lot of spare capacity at off-peak times, hence the introduction of time of use tariff, and there could be lots more generation built to meet increasing demand, it's a little bit different to say 3 or 4 years ago, when there was a strong push for everyone to just consume more at all times because demand was a lot lower than supply. I think tying into Danson's point as well, it's also quite a regional picture in that some areas of the country, there's actually a shortage of power. In Western Kenya in particular, then there's a lot less generation locally than there is supply. And so there's strong efforts to increase transmission from other parts of the country and from the interconnect with Uganda. So that's perhaps something to really bear in mind as we're working through the electric cooking strategy, to figure out where should we focus demand stimulation activities around electric cooking, in terms of where is there increase, where is there surplus supply, and where is that supply already stable in terms of the transmission and distribution network. Okay, so I see Katrine's comment is just about sharing the recording. So yes, hopefully we can share this one as soon as the session is finished, at least with the participants on the WhatsApp group, and then hopefully through a summary blog that we intend to publish for each of these sessions going forward. So let me invite anyone who has not put anything in the chat yet. Does anyone else have a comment that they would like to add to the debate? We've got another 40 minutes or so, and I'd really like to hear from as many of you as possible what you think of these propositions and where we should focus our efforts going forward. Pauline, please go ahead. Pauline, you're still muted if you're talking.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
Hello. Yes, please go ahead. We can hear you now.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, John, for this meeting, for convening this meeting so that we can give our comments. Unfortunately, the KPLC and the regulator are not here, so I hope they take our comments seriously. And my first comment is that it's a general comment as a Kenyan and also as a person who is trying to promote clean cooking, is that Kenyans, it's not the right season for this discussion of increasing tariffs. I really wish they would take option one, your option one, of leaving the burden as it is, because that middle class people and the lower class, they are really suffering. So many, it's time for taking children to school, and people are struggling to do that. And even feeling pressure not to support one or from other people.
Yeah, Pauline, your connection is
yeah. You're breaking. Hello? We can't hear you clearly.
Okay, what I was saying is that Kenyans are suffering, and this discussion by KPLC wanting to increase tariff is not appropriate right now, because people are still struggling with taking children to school. And the target group, the middle income levels, most people are suffering at this time, and most children are still at home, and some have to assist others. So I would really request Kenya Power to hold on increasing of tariffs, and we wait for the economy to improve a little bit. The other thing, as a person in clean cooking, I suggest that we go for this increase of demand. KPLC to think of how to encourage more people to come to clean cooking. As we look at the health issues and all the benefits of clean cooking, I suggest KPLC continues to encourage more people that we demand, so that they can encourage us also who are promoting clean cooking, instead of increasing the tariffs and then we even lose the people we are to, they go away. When this discussion is in the air, it is not good for clean cooking. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. And yeah, it's a shame that no one from EPRA and KPLC has been able to attend. They were both invited, but we did go to EPRA on Friday. I was joined by colleagues from Band Manufacturing, from PowerPay, and by Philomena from CCAK. And we were sat at a very intense roundtable discussion with the e-mobility sector, the power purchase team within Kenya Power, who are responsible for deciding upon the tariffs that they propose to EPRA, and the senior decision makers within EPRA who do have the final say on whether they approve those tariffs or not. So they are very seriously listening, although it's a shame that they're not here participating in this discussion with us. But rest assured that the outcomes of this discussion will be framed in a submission that we will make to KPLC and to EPRA by the end of the week. And then perhaps the consultation process will continue further in terms of collaborative discussions, in terms of how exactly some of these suggestions might possibly be implemented. So they are already taking this seriously. We're not just one voice amongst many. We are a special group which has been given priority alongside the e-mobility sector. So the e-mobility sector, I think, are slightly ahead of us because they already had an e-mobility tariff included in the first proposal by KPLC. But the e-cooking sector is definitely something that both KPLC and EPRA really want to encourage. And they both acknowledge the fact that the proposed tariffs will negatively impact the current uptake of electric cooking. People who already have an appliance will likely use it less, and those who have yet to acquire an appliance will likely think twice. I saw there was another hand that went up. Was it George? Has your question? Yes, George, please go ahead.
Thanks, John. This has been quite an informative session. Looking at how the options, the kind of options that you've well enumerated. So I was just trying to reflect on maybe something you said. So number one, that at this time we are starting to push on e-cooking. We are getting to a point where our excess capacity, both at peak and off peak, is really going down. So that was just an observation in terms of now. And then I think there's a kind of uncertainty in terms of now, are we going into the auction system or given that I don't think the ministry is issuing more EOIs for supply. But my main question was more focused on there was the small commercial tariff. Where is it in your slides? Yes. So maybe for me, my understanding is that here you can look at things like you have the institutions, the schools, the hotels with a bigger capacity. But I think one of the observation looking at development still on that sector is that not much has been done, because in terms of capacity, like what I saw, SNV and were trialing out in Kakuma, those were 30-liter EPCs. So in terms of capacity for that sector, I've not seen much inroads because most of these institutions, you're looking from 150 liters capacity of cooking to around 300, even some as high as 600 liters. So it may be a lack of technology per se, or even the costing of the technology. But I think one of the advantages, I also look at that sector, looking at the cooking institutions, because I've done some work previously on that in terms of promotion of the institutional cook stoves and all that, and also now reflecting that we are getting into that metering is gaining traction, and these are schools with quite a large footprint, able to do PV installation on their massive rooftops, on their domes and all that. So I think trying to look at that still as a low-hanging fruit. Maybe I would be very much interested to see how now that one shapes up. So it was more a comment on that one.
Yeah, thank you. And I was just thinking as you were mentioning then, yes, I imagine many of these small commercial or institutional customers will need larger appliances, but there is a small segment by which the standard household appliances will still be useful for. And for example, for those who have a delay timer on their cooking device, then they could quite comfortably use those time of use tariffs by putting in, say, for example, you're boiling beans to serve tomorrow. You put them in the electric pressure cooker the night before, press the time of use, press the delay timer to start at midnight when the tariff goes down. And then in the morning, you have extremely cheap beans waiting for you. So there are some kind of entry points for what could be referred to as e-cooking favorable tariffs in what has been gazetted. But it is perhaps more challenging to do things in that segment because of that requirement for slightly larger appliances. Having said that, I mean, you already see quite a few institutions and small commercial units across Kenya already using some electricity in their cooking. For example, deep fat fryers are typically already electric, and the same for microwaves as well. So these kinds of appliances could be relevant for further encouragement through more favorable tariffs, although those kind of appliances are typically used at the time that you want to do the cooking. So they would be used during the day at the more expensive rate. I see Pauline's hand was up again. I also see we've been joined by Engineer Ndereva from ELCOS. So Pauline, if you wanted to make a response to anything that George has said, and then maybe we could give the floor to Engineer Ndereva, and if there's anything that you could contribute from the perspective of ELCOS, the Electricity Consumers Association, we'd very much like to hear from you. So Pauline, any responses from you?
We can give the engineer the chance. So remain covered.
Okay, are you ready, Engineer Ndereva? Do you have comments prepared?
Yes, thank you very much. We made numerous comments. My name is Engineer Ndereva. We represent the Electricity Consumers Society of Kenya, and basically that is all consumers across the board, including the industrial consumers. But today I can see that we are focusing on the people who are doing clean cooking. I really also want to appreciate Danson, who has tried to keep us on board. Although we came late, we would have come a bit earlier if we were aware that they had started, but I hope our comments will still be received. Yeah, we were registered in 2015, and so we keep on what people call it making noise because of the electricity cost, but really that is not the intention. It's just to inform our consumers that this is where we need intervention by the government and the regulator as well as the utility. Mine is to just make the comment that when we are trying to push for the clean cooking, remember it is going to make the consumers move the bracket from using less than 100 kilowatt hours, and which is what is there at the moment. If you use less than 100 kilowatt hours, you're going to pay your power at 10 shillings, and it's going to be proposed that they move it to 14 shillings. That is the low cost consumer. And then the next consumer, if you use more than 100 kilowatt hours currently, they are proposing that you will start paying 21.68 Kenya shillings, up from 15.8 Kenya shillings. And so the proposal now is that the bracket or the threshold to be moved from 100 to actually 30 kilowatt hours as the threshold, which is actually something that we are contesting a lot because that is going to seriously cut the bracket on the domestic consumers so that we have the biggest percentage paying more expensively. Now, much as we've said that, so I think the push or the contribution we would have had from clean cooking is that if you are doing seriously cooking, perhaps you can be given a meter aside such that the clean cooking is going to be promoted by we need to have an incentive for clean cooking. Now, I don't know how that can be done by Kenya Power, such that you can have a meter that is dedicated to your cookers, such that it will not be charged as others. If we are not able to push for that, because for every 1,000 units, we are going to get 26 units up from 37 units, which is going to be, again, making clean cooking even more expensive. And I understand from my friend Danson that there's a discussion we were having, and he was trying to say that it is normally cheaper, and I would understand. But now it's going to beat the logic if that is going to be the costing. The other bit is that we also need to look at these technologies that are being used in clean cooking. I know trying to push them to most of the domestic lifeline consumers, or those people who are not paying more than 2,000 Kenya shillings per month. Of course, we need more education on them, because sometimes I know it is not used for roasting sweet potatoes. I don't know how that can be used unless you insert a coil inside the sweet potato or something. That I'm not sure, but I know of the same various other options which it can come in. So if we could push for a metering for only clean cooking using electricity by Kenya Power, maybe that is where it can come in. Otherwise, on the tariffs, I don't know whether we need to touch anything on industrial, because that is where we are getting a demand and the power factor. I don't think we need to dwell on that. But I would like to present just 2 slides or 3 to make sure that at least we are on the same page on what we need to push. I don't know whether I can be able to do that.
Yeah, very happy for you to do that. So let me stop sharing, and then you can start sharing. I also see that Meredith from Bern has joined us. So maybe after you've presented those slides, Meredith, if you would be able to give Bern's perspective.
Okay, thank you. Come to full screen. Share screen. Then I come there, share, okay. I think, I don't know whether you can be able to view from the other side.
Yeah, we can see okay.
Okay, well, okay. So,
now it's good.
Okay. So in clean cooking, what you are finding here, and that has been our biggest noise that we've been making, you can see on the graph on the bottom left, you have the average generation mix, and that is from last year up to around September, just about 2 years or something. But you can see what I have circled at the bottom left is thermal. We are getting around 11.89 or 12%. We are getting that power from the thermal generators, and I would call them only 5 at the moment, which are IPPs, or independent power producers using thermal. But then we have 3 others that we get from Kenigen. We were told that there is a push, because you can see that 11.89 is contributing to, now the graph on the bottom right is contributing to the forex, which is 9%, and the fuel cost, which is 35%. Basically, you can understand like that is going to be 4%. So it is not justifiable for just 12% to be taking about 44% of our bills. And you can see the table on top there is for the domestic lifeline, who has been getting 35 units, who have been getting 48 units. Now they will be getting 35. Now, if we are not together in pushing for this drive, you will understand that if I come to this particular one now, you will see those are the 3 major, the 5 major plants that make power very expensive. So when we started pushing that we need the contract cancelled, you realize that Savo Power was due for the contract termination in around September of 2021. So you would have expected the generation by diesel to have reduced, but you can see whoever has the orange band, which is Rabai, is actually the one who took up that generation. And in fact, you can even see around January of 2022, the generation is even higher. So let us now stop pushing for the retirement of some few thermal generators, because their utilization is 23%. And when you remove one, the others will take up. And right now, it looks like Rabai on the pie chart there is the person who has taken, I think, what Savo Power was using. So, and you can also see another one that is called Triumph Power. Triumph Power, if you look at the graph on top there, you realize that it is having very little contribution. It is the one at the top which is appearing and disappearing. So what happens is that those ones do not contribute much, but we have to keep on paying them for being on capacity, which is quite a bit of money. Even as clean cooking, there is a bit that goes to paying idle power. And we really need to think about that. The last one I wanted to say is that if you look at these graphs which are here, basically because the bracket is going to be up to about 30 kilowatt hours. I don't see anybody who will be doing cooking using electricity who will be below 30 kilowatt hours. So definitely what is going to come is that that being the trend from December of 2008, you can see the trend of power, but you can see the proposed in April 2023, the cost of power will be 38.38 per kilowatt hour if they maintain other components like fuel cost and inflation as the same. So if that is the case, actually the biggest problem we will have is that the fuel cost, which is actually at the bottom left of this screen, you can see how it has been affecting us. It's the biggest component of our varying costs. So what we are proposing is that from the bottom right graph is that we draw a line where we will be getting power as constant. Instead of varying, they can put some stabilization fund, such that you will be absorbing the shocks within the fluctuation every month, such that you can be able to tell, just like what happened in January to August of last year. We had the same cost of power throughout. So you also need to push for the same, that you don't want fluctuations, because you may not be able to tell how much is my ugali going to cost me to cook next month. You should be able to predict, such that even when you are setting the price for your consumers, if you are in a hotel, it should be predictable. So otherwise, it should be reviewed about every start of the year or every start of financial year. Fluctuation in the bills is not going to favor commercial electric cooking at all. So basically, those are my comments, but I'll be happy to just listen in because I came late. But those are basically the contributions that I would also want you to clean cooking to also assist us in pushing for that legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer Andrea. And may I ask, is it possible to share those slides with us? Because that's some really important analysis that you've got here. It would be really useful to be able to include this in the petition that we're making.
Yeah, we are happy. We are happy to share them. I will.
Fantastic, thank you. And then just for your benefit and for the others that came late as well, let me just recap on the different options that we were proposing. Yes. I see that Irene from Kenya Power is also hoping to join us. And then I would like to also give the floor to Meredith from Bern. So let me just do a quick recap.
Okay.
Can you see my slide? Okay, now. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes, we can be able to see them.
Okay, fantastic. So we had 4 options that we were proposing for potential amendments to the tariff, which could help facilitate the uptake of electric cooking. So one is just keep the lifeline as it is, because it's already quite favorable for electric cooking, 100 kilowatt hours per month at a reasonable rate. But of course, that's probably not going to be very favorable for KPLC and their bottom line. Introducing a new consumption band, something around, say, 30 to 100 kilowatt hours per month, either a rising block to provide a step between the lifeline and the regular consumption, or a decreasing block where it goes down to facilitate people growing their consumption. A special tariff for eligible customers, for example, customers who have bought a financed appliance from a KPLC affiliated scheme, which would be a little bit more fiddly to implement, but would have the benefit of getting us more data on how much demand is growing amongst customers who acquire an appliance. And then a special tariff for smart metered appliances. So this, I think, touches on, I think it was George that made these comments earlier as well, around if we know exactly how much electricity is going into the cooking appliance, it's much easier for us to make the argument that this is something that should be a national priority, because we know that it is something that is going directly for a need that should be prioritized because it has health, gender, economic impacts that are broad reaching. So having some of the smart meters that are already embedded in many of the new generation of the next generation of electric cooking appliances incorporated in the Kenya Power billing system, or utilizing 2 meters in the same way that the water heating separate metering system currently works could allow us to do this. And then of course we get the best data in terms of consumption, usage patterns, impact on demand stimulation. So those are the 4 that we were evaluating, and I'll leave this slide up here so that we can all see the different 4 options. Maybe just before we go to Meredith, then Engineer Ndereva, do you have any comments on any of those 4 options and the viability of any of those? Are there any that you think would be particularly more or less attractive to Kenya Power or to EPRA based upon your kind of longer experience of lobbying?
I look at them more seriously, but for us from our end, we were trying to say that we were not trying to advocate for any change on the band. In fact, we still even wanted the same cost to be maintained, but we still have some other discussion we'll be having next week with EPRA before the final deliberation on what they have approved. But we even had another meeting about last week with them, and we still pushed for the same, and we said we are not ready to go for any, I mean, the drive by the Sustainable Development Goals, if they change the band from 100 to 30, is actually going to cut it by about more than 70% of the existing is going to be cut and dumped to the higher cost. And so we said we can only go slowly by slowly, such that we can, of course, say the band to be up to 70 kilowatt hours so that we can do a third of the consumption. So, but basically, I can also see we are thinking the same direction, that we need to structure the bands, but we cannot come to 30 kilowatt hours for the whole country. It's going to be actually a very small percentage of the people who are going to benefit from that. Yeah,
it's a big jump from 100 down to 30, and it would be very easy to implement to just leave it as it is. But yeah, there is a need to increase the revenue that Kenya Power is bringing in. So some kind of restructuring, I think, is necessary. But I agree with your proposition that it could be made a little bit less abrupt than the proposed change now. Meredith, are you ready to jump in and share some reflections from Bern's side?
Yeah, sure. So on our end, our reflections are mainly around something that's easy to do for now, and in terms of the proposed changes, and that's if we could have an in-between band between the 30 to 100 kilowatt hours, because from our perspective, our customers consume slightly more than 30. So this change will move them significantly from the 7 shillings to 21 shillings. And that's such a big jump and will hamper any efforts we're trying to promote in shifting them to cooking with electricity. So that in-between band to cater for, I think KPLC said there are about 1.9 million customers who are consuming between 30 to 100 kilowatt hours per month. So if you could have that band to just help smoothen a transition into using more electricity, and the more electricity they use as well, it's better for KPLC, because it will be a higher cost, not as high as the 21, but slightly higher. But at the same time, they're consuming more power, which is also better in terms of growing the grid and capacity and meeting the targets that they have for that as well. So that's the proposition that we are taking as Bern. In terms of the e-cooking tariff, we look at it as a long-term, more of a long-term play. So it'd be good to start the discussions now, but that's something that should have to happen maybe much later in the future.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of framing what you're mentioning here, in terms of those 4 options here, I think you're advocating strongly for the number 2, which would be relatively easy to implement now, and could, if Kenya Power and EPRA would like to brand it as an e-cooking tariff, then it could be branded as an e-cooking tariff rather than this special tariff with an eligibility requirement, which we were discussing in option 3. That one, I think, would clearly be referred to as some kind of electric cooking, e-cooking tariff, because that is part of the eligibility criteria. But the Uganda e-cooking tariff is actually very similar to option 2, where it's a band that is available to all customers and is promoted as something that is designed to encourage uptake of electric cooking, but of course is a general tool for promoting demand stimulation for any kind of application. I do see that we have an Irene who has joined us, and I was aware that Irene Wenjohi from Kenya Power was hoping to join us today, but was held up in another meeting beforehand. So I'm going to ask, is Irene Wenjohi? I see there's already also an Irene Kicho here as well, but is the Irene without another name Irene Wanjoki? And if it is, then would you like to unmute and provide any reflections on the options that we're evaluating here? I'm not sure at what point you joined and if you are the right Irene. So Irene without another name, please unmute and reveal yourself.
John, good morning. Class team. Can you hear me?
You're very muted, but it's a bit muffled.
Muffled.
You
can hear me?
I hear you. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I've just joined, so I've not really gone through. I think I'd like to listen more as I read through the three that I'm seeing here, because I have just joined. Let me just look at them first, if you don't mind.
So we've only got 8 minutes left in our dialogue. So let me just give you a very quick whistle-stop tour of the options, most of which we have discussed individually anyway. But let me just take you through them once again very quickly so you can see what we're discussing here. Option 1, do nothing, leave the lifeline tariff as it is, because it was actually already very good for promoting electric cooking. Option 2, introduce a new consumption band, which is what Meredith was just describing, where we do something for the 30 to 100 kilowatt hours per month block. Either we reduce the price to somewhere in between the lifeline and the regular tariff, and it gives a stepping stone to help people grow their consumption out of lifeline without the fear that all their electricity is suddenly going to become way more expensive. And then, or a decreasing block tariff like the Umemi e-cooking tariff in Uganda, where you actually make it even cheaper than the consumption below that amount. So that would really encourage people to grow their demand within that block. Option 3, offer a special tariff for eligible customers. So for example, people acquiring an appliance in a KPLC affiliated appliance financing scheme, we get the meter number and we switch them to a different tariff, similar to the way that people would be switched from domestic regular to domestic lifeline, and they pay that tariff going forward. This will always also give us the opportunity of getting a lot more data, because we would then have access to the customer billing data of all of those customers who have purchased appliances, and we can see, is it an effective way of growing demand or not? And then option 4, special tariff for smart metered appliances. So utilizing the hardware that's being embedded into the next generation of cooking appliances to interface with KPLC's customer billing database and to implement a special tariff based upon electricity that we know is used exclusively for cooking. So this one is the most targeted, but the most difficult to implement. I see Engineer Ndereva has also got his hand up. So maybe Engineer Ndereva, if I give the floor to you, and then Irene, if you are ready to make any reflections on those before we close in the next few minutes. Engineer Ndereva, over to you.
Thank you very much, John. I think just also to give her time, because she claims that she wants to look at it more, but I am happy that you've been able to introduce. Now, I just wanted you to allow me to also just throw in another screen, very short.
Okay, sure. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'm trying to. Okay, thank you very much. What I wanted us to look at that as we wait for her contribution is that first of all, let me say that we would have wanted also to look at whether during cooking in the evening, whether you can be given the time of use tariff. Most of the industrial tariff are normally given an incentive where if they exceed a certain amount of cooking or consumption of power, whatever they are going to consume over and above their 6-month average, they are going to be charged at 50%. Maybe you can also try to pursue that. It's also an area that maybe during the tariff review it can be considered. But I also wanted to check that there are several areas that much as clean cooking is going to be pushed to be approved by Kenya. We had picked a few things that I think you're also going to agree that this is what we are suffering from. that there is any ambiguity that, and this is actually the Consumer Protection Act I have tried to extract a bit. You're saying any ambiguity that allows for more than one reasonable interpretation of consumer grievance provided by the supplier to the consumer, or any information that must be disclosed under the Act shall be interpreted to the benefit of the consumer. You realize that even those people who have been using clean cooking, which I also call ironing as cooking a cloth, is also part of clean cooking. There are several areas that they had not tried to explain to those users. And we tend to think that in clean cooking, you should try to advocate for more training of your consumers. This one. And then number two, a representation that misrepresents the purpose of any charge or the proposed charge. Out of the 7 components on the billing, in clean cooking, the consumers should also be tried to be it should be highlighted that they are not able to understand most of those components, and why they only have to get like less than 40% of their bill that goes to the useful charge. The rest are actually taxes. We are trying to push that to the Parliament. I have a meeting next week with the Senate. We are still going to raise the same, but I'm going to mention clean cooking as part of the people who are supposed to benefit of that. Then number 3 is a representation that misrepresents or exaggerates the benefits that are likely to flow to a consumer if any consumer helps a person obtain new or potential customers. You realize I had in the public participation in Mombasa, there was a certain client or a participant who said they are actually requesting Kenya Power to increase the hours that goes into off-peak tariff. I mean, the off-peak hours should be pushed. And then I was asking myself, that consumer does not understand that there is no gain they normally get, even if it is off-peak or it is peak, as far as you are a domestic consumer. And even when you're an industrial consumer, it is still sometimes does not actually add up to anything. We were trying to take on the biggest consumer in Eastern and Central Africa. The consumer actually got 1.64% of the saving on average from the time of use tariff or the off-peak consumption. So again, it has exaggerated the benefits such that even the people are not aware that they are not gaining. And we are also trying to push for that. That is still from the Consumer Protection Act and is expected from that. Then number 4, the consumer is not reasonably able to protect his or her interests because of disability, ignorance, illiteracy, inability to understand the language or an agreement or civil. We are in agreement that actually that is where most of the countries in Africa are. They are not able to understand, even when they are told that you need to protect your interest in public participation. You are not even able to understand what you need to say. Then lastly, then the consumer transaction is excessively one-sided in favor of someone other than the consumer. That transaction alone is so much one-sided that it is not actually assisting the consumer. This slide is trying to show that the consumers who are actually paying the literal amount of electricity are the ones based on the yellow band. There is a green, yellow, and some other band there on the left. But this band by KPLC, you are able to understand that those people who are paying power between 100 and 500, that is 114.99, they actually pay 22 Kenya shillings. That is the charge on M-Pesa. And then Kenya Power doesn't pay anything for them. Then for those who pay between 500 to 999, they also pay 22 again, and nothing is paid for them by Kenya Power. Then when you come to, again, 1,000 to 1,499, Kenya Power pays 11 shillings. Now, the misconception I found with the consumers is that they are telling each other, if you need to get more tokens, keep on buying small units. If you normally pay like 5,000 a month, keep on buying 500 or 1,000. But you can already see every transaction is costing you an amount, but it does not reduce the amount you are charged. So again, you also need to come here and say, because we are calculating and we found that 367 billion every month is normally taken by this transaction from Kenyans, because quite a bit of amount, about 60% of the amount paid to Kenya Power is normally paid through this M-Pesa kind of a transaction. And if these are the charges, then this transaction has been skewed to benefit more of another person. We are not sure whether it's Kenya Power who normally benefit from it, or is it Safaricom, but basically there is another area you also need to come in and say, as in clean cooking, don't want anybody in this region to be charged this amount, because it is also possible to pay through, not to pay bill, it's also possible, it's possible for you to pay through buy goods and you don't get charged anything. I don't know how you're going to specify your account number, but actually there is a tariff that around this amount, we don't need to lose any more money when the power is that expensive in trying to purchase more. And that is why I'm saying number 5 here, it is excessively one-sided in favor of someone other than the consumer. Otherwise, thank you very much. I just wanted to point out that. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Ndereva. And yeah, I think it's also really important to make sure that we are protecting the consumers who are consuming the least, who are likely the least able financially. And so making sure that the transaction fees and any other charges that those consumers incur are kept to an absolute minimum. I'm very conscious of time though, and I would like to give a word to the Kenya Power team who do join us at the very end of the call here. I see Christina has also joined us as well. Irene, would you like to make some final statements just before we close the dialogue today?
John, you can hear me better?
Yeah, that's better than before. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, I think I'm going to just concentrate only on the table that you had shown earlier, and what you explained earlier, because I have not understood the token bit of the engineer, what he was explaining. I've not understood where he was going. But on the e-cooking tariff, I think the best thing is to the 100. If you go for the 100 and say that we remain with the 100 units, for example, which is the easiest, you're saying the easiest way to go and no charge is necessary, is the easiest implementation. That one, I can tell you, it will not sell. Why? Because we have over 6 million people who are on that tariff. They're using less than 15 units per month. We can't remain there because it's actually not possible for us to continue servicing these customers. We need for the tariff to go up, for more people to go up to the domestic customer. I think the best, the one that would most probably sell is more for the targeted customer. I think that was number 4? I think
3 and 4 are both targeted. So 3 is targeted if you have an appliance purchase through a financing program. 4 is targeted if you have a smart meter in your e-cooking appliance.
I think so. The e-cooking one, the targeted one, the smart one, maybe as we collect more data, that is more convincing. Because if you were there at the meeting, the IPRA meeting, even the IPRA people do not have these appliances. So not a lot of people are aware of them. Yes, we are aware that they are there, but how many people are aware? How many people are using appliances that are actually for cooking at home? Yes, they're using them, but how are we going to measure? That is the question everybody is asking me when I talk about e-cooking tariff. So I think as we create awareness in the next 3 years, when we go for the next tariff in 3 years, then we will have more data, we will have more people aware, and it will be easier to fight for an e-cooking tariff. For now, I think the one that is easier to fight for is the targeted one. I think that is what I would say for now.
Excellent. Well, I think that is a great point to close the session today. I appreciate that we are a little bit over time, so thank you to those that have stayed with us. In terms of how this is going to proceed, then we do have this submission that we've been invited to make to EPRA and KPLC by the end of the week. I am going to refine that PowerPoint that's presented today together with colleagues at Bern and anyone else who is interested in supporting that process. So if you would like to be a part of the further kind of refining of this messaging and the documentation that will be shared with EPRA and KPLC, then please do let me know. Probably the best way to do that is on the e-cooking community of practice WhatsApp group. If you're not a part of that group already, then it is a very dynamic group. If you would like to join, then please do drop your WhatsApp number into the chat here. I will pick it up and I will add you. It's a cross-sectoral group, so it's got everyone in there from policymakers to research participants to everyday cooks, Kenya Power. I think some EPRA members are already in there already. So please do let me know if you'd like to join. And that's probably where we'll continue most of the other consultations. So if you do have further things to add, if there are other thoughts that occur to you throughout this week, please do share them with the Community of Practice group. It's also a great place to get reflections, get opinions of others as well. So let's keep the dialogue going on there. Brian has asked me to also request that you, if you haven't already, check the chat. There's a registration request on there so that we can capture the details of who's attending these sessions so that we know who our audience is and we can refine future sessions accordingly. And there will be another dialogue next month. We're not quite sure of the date yet and we're not quite sure of the topic, but we will let you know via the e-cooking Community of Practice, which is our main means of publicizing this series of dialogues and other news within the sector. So I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who's attended today. Thank you especially to Engineer Ndereva from ELCOS and to Meredith from Bern and to Irene from Kenya Power for joining us. And thank you to everyone else for your input into this. This is a really important moment in time, and there is the potential that we can make a significant change to national regulations, which could have a significant impact on the uptake of electric cooking in Kenya going forward. So it is really important that you participate as actively as possible, and we really appreciate the input you shared so far. And please do keep helping us to refine this throughout the next week, especially, which is a really critical period. Thank you also to the CCAK team for setting up the dialogue today, to Philomena and to Brian. We really appreciate your support, and we're looking forward to the next dialogue next month. So thank you, everyone, and let's call it a day today.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you.